The first light appeared over the Pacific, a bright line in the early morning sky. At first, people thought it was another meteor. The world had seen enough falling stars and debris from old satellites to ignore such things. But then the light didn't fade. It split into patterns, geometric shapes that moved with purpose, as if something intelligent was guiding them. Within minutes, every news network and communication channel on Earth went silent for a moment, and then came alive. The same message appeared everywhere in every language known to humans. We come in peace. We seek understanding. For years, humanity had imagined how first contact would happen. Some thought it would come through a simple radio signal. Others believed an enormous ship would hover over a major city. But no one expected it to happen this way, quietly, peacefully, yet so clearly. When telescopes finally locked onto the source, what they saw took every scientist's breath away. It was not a single ship, but an entire formation. Massive vessels shaped like silver wings, orbiting in perfect harmony above the blue curve of Earth. The fleet was enormous, larger than any human-made structure in space. For the first time in history, the world united instantly. Governments called emergency meetings, militaries stood ready but cautious, and scientists begged for the chance to communicate. The United Earth Council, a group formed decades earlier to represent humanity in off-world affairs, was suddenly at the center of everything. The aliens called themselves the Cathari Collective. Their first transmission was calm, almost soothing. They spoke of traveling through galaxies for centuries, seeking knowledge and harmony. They claimed they had never made direct contact with a species as young as humanity before, but they had observed Earth for a long time. Their goal, they said, was simple: to learn and share. There was no demand, no threat, no hint of superiority. Still, humans couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and suspicion. History had taught them that peace was often fragile, and that intentions were not always what they seemed. Yet, for the first time, the world didn't argue about how to respond. Every nation agreed humanity would answer together. Within weeks, preparations began for the first meeting. The chosen place was Lunar Station Union Dawn, a neutral ground orbiting Earth's moon. It had served as a hub for science and diplomacy for decades, but this would be its most important mission. The eyes of the world were on that small outpost as a single human delegation prepared to meet visitors from another world. The Cathari ships approached silently. They moved like living creatures, glowing softly with shifting colors. When one of their vessels docked at Union Dawn, even the most seasoned astronauts felt their breath stop. The ship's surface looked fluid, not metal but something in between, a blend of energy and matter. It shimmered as if alive. When the airlock opened, everyone held their breath. The Cathari stepped through. They were tall and graceful, their bodies covered in light patterns that pulsed like slow heartbeats. Their faces were calm, with features that were both alien and strangely familiar. There was no armor, no weapon, only curiosity in their wide, clear eyes. The first human to greet them was a diplomat representing the entire planet. She extended her hand, a gesture of peace. For a moment, the Cathari tilted their head, then raised a slender arm and gently mirrored the gesture. The room erupted in quiet relief. That was the beginning. The first conversations were careful, slow, and full of translation delays. The Cathari were fascinated by human languages, by how emotion and logic existed together in the same sentence. They asked endless questions about art, history, music, and the way humans connected with one another. But the real surprise came when they asked about human technology. They had expected a species barely reaching into space. Instead, they discovered fusion-powered ships, artificial gravity, deep space colonies, and advanced AI systems. Humanity had changed since the Cathari last observed them. The aliens realized that humans had moved faster than any species they had ever known. It wasn't just progress. It was determination. Still, what truly unsettled the Cathari wasn't the machines or weapons. It was the way humans carried themselves. The delegation stood firm, spoke clearly, and looked at their guests as equals, not as frightened children meeting gods. Every question from the Cathari was met with thoughtful, confident answers. Every agreement was made with care, not submission. That confidence puzzled the aliens. During private discussions aboard their ships, some Cathari leaders expressed unease. They had met hundreds of civilizations in their journeys, but none with such presence. Most young species showed fear or worship during first contact. Humans showed neither. They treated the meeting as a partnership, not a miracle. Days passed. Meetings continued. Scientists, translators, and engineers from both sides shared data. Slowly, trust began to grow. The Kethari shared small fragments of their knowledge, new methods of energy conversion, ways to purify water in seconds, and techniques for growing food in harsh environments. In return, humanity shared its own discoveries, innovations in nanotech, neural computing, and medicine. What shocked the Kethari most was how often human inventions were born out of hardship. Every breakthrough seemed to carry a story of survival behind it. Late one evening, when most meetings were done, a young Kethari researcher studied a human history archive. They saw images of cities destroyed by war, floods that wiped out entire regions, and pandemics that had nearly ended civilization. Yet each time, humanity had rebuilt. Faster, stronger, wiser. The researcher wrote in their log. They rise from their own ashes as if failure is only fuel. By the end of that first week, one truth had become clear to the Kethari. They had not come to teach or guide. They had come to learn. The aliens were beginning to understand something deeper. Humanity's greatest strength was not in technology or intelligence. It was in the spirit that refused to surrender. But among the humans, feelings were mixed. Some feared the aliens' intentions, believing peace was too easy. Others saw hope, a chance to end centuries of division by stepping into the stars united. On Earth, crowds gathered in city squares to watch live transmissions from Luna. Children stayed up late, staring at the screens as humans and aliens spoke together for the first time. People cried, laughed, and held one another, realizing they were witnessing the start of something far greater than any war or invention. A single line from the first Kethari message remained in everyone's minds. We come in peace. We seek understanding. But deep inside, both species were beginning to understand that peace and understanding were not simple words. They were choices, difficult, fragile, and powerful. As the Kethari ship slowly pulled back from Union Dawn, the human delegation stood watching. No one spoke. The silent hum of the engines echoed through the station. It was not the sound of departure. It was the sound of history beginning. In the following days, messages flowed between Earth and the Kethari fleet. Discussions of trade, exploration, and science grew quickly. The aliens promised to share more knowledge, and humanity offered partnership, not worship. Still, questions remained. Why had the Kethari chosen Earth now? What had drawn them after centuries of quiet observation? And why did they seem both impressed and uneasy at the same time? For now, those answers were hidden. But one thing was certain. This was not the meeting of the weak and the strong. It was the meeting of equals. And though neither side realized it yet, the events that had just begun on that quiet lunar station would soon reshape the entire galaxy. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger universe, and the universe was finally looking back. The days after first contact passed in a blur. Every screen, every radio, and every conversation on Earth was filled with one topic: the Kethari. Their ships remained in orbit, still glowing softly, still silent except for the calm messages they sent through official channels. People across the planet were living through something that only existed in imagination before. At first, life felt unreal. Students in classrooms stopped to watch live broadcasts from Luna Station. Workers on construction sites took breaks just to listen to the latest translation. Old rivals on Earth found themselves standing side by side, sharing coffee while watching the same footage. For the first time in centuries, there was no war, no rivalry, no division. Only one question echoing in every mind. What comes next? The meetings on Union Dawn continued. The Kethari delegation began to visit different areas of the human-built station. They studied everything: the metal corridors, the recycled air, even the old flags displayed in the hallways. To them, these were symbols of a species that had learned to build from limited means. When the humans guided them through the engineering decks, the aliens were quiet. They watched how humans spoke with one another, how they worked as teams. It wasn't about perfection, it was about trust. One human might make a mistake, and another would instantly step in to fix it. No blame, no fear. The Kethari noticed that, and they found it strange. On their own worlds, mistakes often led to shame. Among humans, mistakes seemed to lead to innovation. Later that night, one of the alien envoys sent a private message back to their main ship. The words were brief. They don't fear failure. They build from it. The next day's meeting was about trade and cooperation. The Kethari offered to share their knowledge of energy technology, reactors that ran cleanly for centuries without decay. In return, humanity shared designs for artificial intelligence systems that could learn and adapt beyond simple programming. The exchange was meant to be balanced, but it quickly became clear that both sides were more curious than cautious. What amazed the Kethari most was not the machines themselves. It was the human reaction to progress. When the aliens showed them a tool that could heal damaged cells instantly, the humans didn't just marvel. They asked how it could be made cheaper, portable, and used in poor regions on Earth. The Kethari couldn't understand that kind of thinking at first. Most civilizations they met wanted power or prestige. Humanity wanted application, ways to help people. After every session, the Kethari spent long hours in private, discussing what they had seen. The more they observed humans, the less they felt like teachers. There was something deeper here, something no amount of data could explain. Back on Earth, the world was changing fast. There was no longer fear of invasion, but a kind of restless curiosity. People filled museums, parks, and cafes to talk about the future. Artists painted stars and silver ships on city walls. Scientists worked overtime, trying to understand the materials the aliens had shown them. The United Earth Council had to ask everyone to stay calm, to remember that friendship took time. But excitement was spreading like wildfire. On Union Dawn, the Kethari leader requested something unexpected. They wanted to see how humans lived, not in simulations or videos, but in real life. After careful discussion, permission was granted for a small visit to Earth itself. Their first destination was a quiet coastal city. The landing was simple, with only a small crowd allowed to witness it. The air was filled with tension and wonder as the Kethari stepped onto the planet for the first time. The ocean breeze carried salt and warmth. Birds flew overhead and the sound of waves echoed softly. The aliens stood there for several seconds, silent, just watching the horizon. One of them finally spoke through the translator. "Your world is loud with life." That moment became one of the most replayed videos in human history. Over the next few days, the Kethari visited farms, schools, hospitals, and research centers. They saw children laughing, elders telling stories, and workers fixing machines with bare hands. Everywhere they went, people greeted them not as gods, but as guests. The aliens were fascinated by human art. They studied sculptures, music, and paintings as if they were sacred texts. When they saw a group of children singing an old Earth song, their lights pulsed faster, a sign of deep emotion in their species. One alien quietly recorded the sound and later played it aboard their ship for others to hear. But what struck them most was how humans remembered pain. In every museum, they saw reminders of wars, disasters, and losses. Instead of hiding their history, humans displayed it openly. One Kethari researcher asked a human guide why they did this. The guide simply said, "Because forgetting makes it easier to repeat." That sentence spread through the Kethari fleet like a quiet storm. Back in orbit, their leaders began to compare human history with their own. The Kethari had long ago erased the darkest parts of their past, believing it was the only way to stay peaceful. But seeing humanity, strong, united yet unafraid of memory, made them question everything they thought they knew about balance. During another meeting aboard Union Dawn, the Kethari presented a question that surprised the human diplomats. "How did you survive yourselves?" they asked. The humans looked at one another before replying, "By learning from our pain." The aliens didn't respond for several minutes. Their body lights flickered faintly as they processed the words. In their own language, they had no single term for resilience. It was a concept too rare in their history. In the following sessions, the tone of discussion began to change. The Kethari no longer spoke as mentors. They asked questions, real, searching questions about human behavior, emotion, and unity. They wanted to know why humans risked their lives for strangers, why they built art that no one paid for, and why they laughed even after tragedy. Each answer only deepened their confusion and admiration. Humanity, they realized, wasn't guided by logic alone. There was something else, a force that didn't fit into their calculations. Word of these private discussions began to reach the Cathari homeworlds. Some of their scholars grew uneasy. To them, humanity was unpredictable, emotional, even dangerous in its potential. But others began to see something different. They saw in humanity a spark their own civilization had lost, an energy that came from struggle and hope. A message was sent across the Cathari network. They are not what we expected. They are something new. On Earth, life continued, but with a quiet shift in the air. The first months of contact had erased fear and replaced it with pride. Humanity had faced visitors from beyond the stars and stood tall. They hadn't begged, they hadn't bowed. They had simply listened and learned. For the first time, the Cathari and the humans shared a meal together aboard Union Dawn. The aliens could not eat human food, but they created a symbolic gesture, sharing small energy crystals that emitted light when touched. Humans responded with a simple toast, lifting cups of water. It was a strange, silent ceremony, yet somehow it carried more weight than any treaty. Two species born on worlds light years apart were beginning to understand each other, not through power but through respect. After the meal, one of the older human representatives spoke quietly, almost to himself. We used to look at the stars and wonder if someone out there would destroy us. Now I think the question was never who might destroy us, but who might remind us why we exist. The Cathari leader didn't reply, but later that night they added a personal note to their report. They are fragile, but their spirit bends light itself. By the end of the month, both sides agreed to a deeper alliance. They would share exploration routes, scientific data, and peaceful missions into uncharted regions. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, not as a child seeking guidance, but as an equal walking beside an ancient race. Yet even as peace blossomed, questions still lingered. The Cathari had begun to study human combat strategies, disaster responses, and crisis psychology. They were fascinated, even unsettled, by how quickly humans adapted when cornered. Some Cathari officers whispered that under their friendly smiles, humanity carried something that no other species had, a quiet, sleeping power that could change everything. No one spoke it aloud then, but deep down the realization had begun to form. The Cathari had come to meet a young civilization of dreamers. Instead, they had found a force forged by fire, one that the galaxy had never seen before. The stars above watched silently, as if waiting. The first chapter of peace had been written, but something far greater and far more powerful was only beginning. The silence that followed the first contact battle hung heavy across the galaxy. The alien fleets that once thought humans were weak now floated quietly in orbit above Earth, their crews trying to understand what they had just witnessed. For the first time in galactic history, an unknown, untested species had turned the tide of a war that should have destroyed them. The Cathari commanders were the first to send messages of peace. They admitted they had underestimated humanity. Their ships had been badly damaged, but they were alive only because of human help, and that realization began to spread far beyond Earth's sky. The humans, too, were still recovering. The great shipyards worked day and night, repairing vessels that had taken heavy hits. Inside the command centers, engineers and pilots sat in silence watching replay footage of the battle. They couldn't quite believe it themselves. They had fought side by side with aliens, something no one had imagined just months ago. But among the quiet pride, there was also a deep sense of concern. Humanity had revealed its power, something they had hidden for generations. Their technologies, once believed primitive by galactic standards, had evolved faster than anyone expected. And now everyone knew it. In the following weeks, the Galactic Council sent emissaries to Earth. They wanted to meet this species that had saved the Cathari fleet. They wanted to see what kind of people could face impossible odds and still fight like that. The day the alien envoys landed on Earth was one that would be remembered for centuries. The skies above the United Earth Alliance headquarters were clear, the air still. People gathered in cities and open fields, watching the shimmering crafts descend slowly through the clouds. The ships were beautiful, sleek, glowing with soft colors that reflected the sun. When the aliens stepped out, their movements were graceful, cautious. Their faces were unreadable, but their eyes studied everything around them. They expected a proud and arrogant welcome. Instead, they found something different. The humans stood calmly. They were not boasting, not celebrating. They greeted the visitors with open hands and calm voices. "Welcome to Earth," the human commander said simply. The Cathari envoy tilted his head. "You do not celebrate victory?" The human replied, "We don't celebrate survival. We build from it." Those words were recorded and shared across the stars. It was the first time aliens saw that humanity's strength was not in their weapons, but in their attitude. Meetings began between Earth and the Council representatives. They discussed alliances, trade, and defense. But beneath the formal talks there was tension. The Council wanted to know how humans had advanced so quickly, how they had built weapons capable of bending physics itself, how they had managed to create AIs that could make decisions faster than any known machine. The humans listened carefully, but revealed very little. Their technology was built from necessity, not pride. Their world had suffered disasters, climate collapses, wars, and famine. In surviving those trials, they had learned to innovate fast and work together when it mattered most. During one of the meetings, a Cathari scientist asked, "You faced destruction many times in your history. What drives you to keep fighting?" The human answered, "Because if we stop, everything we lost stays lost." That answer left the room silent. Soon, stories began spreading through the galactic network about the humans' past. The other species were astonished. They learned that Earth had once been divided by endless conflicts, yet somehow united under a single banner when the stars came calling. They learned that humans were not born into peace. They built it from pain. The Cathari were especially fascinated by the human concept of perseverance. In their culture, when something failed, it was abandoned, but humans would rebuild it again and again until it worked. It was a mindset no one in the galaxy had seen before. As days turned into weeks, the relationship between Earth and the Council began to change. The aliens, who came expecting to inspect a dangerous power, now found themselves drawn to humanity's resilience. They saw people working together not out of fear but out of hope. However, not everyone in the galaxy was pleased. In the distant systems, powerful empires began to whisper. They feared that the rise of humanity would upset the balance that had lasted for thousands of years. The humans were unpredictable. They didn't follow the usual rules of diplomacy or power. They acted on instinct, emotion, and unity. And somehow, it worked. While those whispers grew louder, something else was happening on Earth. The humans and the Cathari began working together on a new project, a shared station orbiting between their worlds. It would serve as a symbol of peace and knowledge, where scientists from both species could learn from each other. The station was named Haven's Reach. It was massive, shining like a silver crown against the stars. It had human design at its core, strong, efficient, and practical. But the Cathari added their own touch, filling it with light and harmony. The day Haven's Reach went online, both worlds watched as its signal lit up the night sky. It was a new beginning, a promise that the war's chaos would never return. Inside the station, humans and Cathari shared stories of their worlds. They laughed, debated, and discovered new things about each other. For many of them, it was the first time they realized how similar they truly were. Both had loved, lost, and dreamed. Both had feared the unknown. One night, while looking out at the endless stars, a young human scientist turned to her Cathari counterpart and said, "Do you think the galaxy will ever understand us?" The Cathari replied softly, "They will. But first they must understand themselves." Those quiet exchanges became the foundation of a friendship that would change history. Months later, an unexpected event shook the peace again. Deep in an uncharted sector, signals began to appear. Distress calls from Cathari outposts along the border. Something was attacking them. But this time it wasn't humans. It was a species the Council thought extinct, the Varn Dominion. The Varn were once the most feared race in the galaxy, known for destroying anything they could not control. For centuries they had vanished, leaving only ruins behind. Now they had returned. The Cathari fleets mobilized quickly, but their defenses were not enough. The Varn ships moved faster than light should allow, tearing through colonies before reinforcements could arrive. Panic spread through the Council worlds, but on Earth there was no panic, only movement. The humans had seen this before. They knew what it meant to face extinction. The United Earth Command called an emergency meeting. Within hours, fleets were being prepared, engines roaring to life and pilots stepping into their suits. The humans didn't ask for permission. They didn't wait for votes. They simply said, "We go." When the first human ships entered the battle, the Kethari were already losing ground. The sky was filled with burning debris, and the Varn armada blazed across the system like a storm. But then came the sound, the deep hum of human drives activating across the dark. The humans didn't enter the battle with fear. They entered with precision, with unity. They didn't attack recklessly. Every move was calculated, every risk measured. The Varn fired first. The humans answered with silence and then power. Their weapons lit the darkness with white light, their ships moving in perfect formation. The Kethari soldiers watching from their damaged vessels could hardly believe it. In a matter of minutes, the balance shifted. The Varn realized too late that the humans were not like other species. They didn't retreat when outnumbered, they adapted. They learned. They pushed forward. When the last Varn cruiser fell, silence filled the system. The humans didn't cheer. They simply stood guard over the wounded Kethari ships and began rescue operations. Messages from across the galaxy began to flood in. Every world, every race wanted to know one thing. Who are these humans? The Kethari leader answered that question in a broadcast that would become legendary. They are the ones who stand when no one else will. They are the storm that protects, the fire that refuses to die. The humans are not the galaxy's danger. They are its balance. From that day forward, everything changed. Humanity was no longer seen as a new species struggling to survive. They were seen as the force that could change the course of history. The galaxy had met many powerful civilizations before, but none like this. None who fought with both heart and reason. None who saw victory not as pride, but as responsibility. The aliens had made first contact thinking they would teach humanity. Instead, they learned that humans carried the one power the galaxy had forgotten, the power to never give up. No matter how dark the night became, and deep in their hearts, the aliens realized something simple and profound. Humanity was not just another species. They were the galaxy's ultimate force of will. The months after the alliance began were calm on the surface, but deep inside the hearts of both humans and Kethari, something powerful was stirring. The meetings, the trade, and the shared learning had built a bridge of trust, but also curiosity. The Kethari wanted to understand what made humans so adaptable, and the humans wanted to know what the Kethari feared most. That curiosity soon turned into an opportunity neither side expected. A signal came from deep space, a distress call from a region beyond the known borders of both species. The message was broken and full of static, but one word stood out again and again: Varn. To most of humanity, the word meant nothing. But the Kethari delegates froze when they heard it. The Varn Dominion was not a myth. It was a warning, whispered in Kethari history. A race of conquerors who destroyed without reason. Long ago, the Kethari had fought them and barely survived. The Varn had vanished for centuries, believed to be extinct. Now it seemed they were back. The Kethari fleet began immediate preparations. Their council requested that all communication with the Varn system be monitored. They wanted to investigate, but they hesitated. They remembered the wars that had nearly ended their own civilization. When the message reached the United Earth Council, there was silence for a long time. Humanity had known wars too. They understood what it meant to face a threat that didn't talk or reason, and before anyone could suggest caution, Earth sent a simple message to the Kethari fleet: "You will not face this alone." That decision changed everything. In orbit above Earth, human and Kethari engineers began working side by side. The Kethari ships were elegant, powered by advanced energy cores that glowed like captured suns. The human ships were raw and solid, built for endurance rather than beauty. But when they began linking systems, something incredible happened. Their technologies, so different in design, complemented each other perfectly. Within weeks, a joint fleet was ready. It wasn't an army. It was a force for defense to investigate the Varn threat and, if needed, protect the galaxy. The first mission was simple: locate the source of the signal and assess the situation. As the fleet prepared to leave, the world watched once again. Every channel, every broadcast showed humans shaking hands or glowing limbs with their alien allies. For the first time, ships from two species launched together into the stars. The journey to the edge of known space took several days. During that time, the humans and Cathari shared stories. The humans spoke of exploration and their desire to see what lay beyond every horizon. The Cathari spoke of their past, the time before their peace, when fear had guided them. There was a quiet bond forming in those long hours between the stars. When they finally arrived at the coordinates, what they found sent chills through both crews. A small colony world, one of the Cathari's oldest settlements, was in ruins. The surface was scorched, the atmosphere thin and broken. No life signals, no survivors. The Cathari ship scanned every inch of it, and then they found them. The remains of Varn ships torn apart but clearly active not long ago. It was clear that the Varn had returned, and this time, they had destroyed without warning. The Cathari leaders were shaken. They remembered the fear, the helplessness from their ancient wars. Some of them argued to retreat and gather more fleets. But the humans did not agree. One human officer stood up during the council and said something that would later be remembered by both species for centuries. If they have started again, we stop them now. Fear never brings peace, it only delays the next war. The Cathari were silent. They had never seen such conviction in a species so young. To the humans, the idea of running was unthinkable. They had faced worse, wars on their own soil, disasters that erased cities, yet they always rebuilt. After a long pause, the Cathari leader finally nodded. The decision was made. They would not run. The joint fleet began searching for the Varn. Days passed with no sign, but the humans worked tirelessly, scanning and analyzing data. They discovered something the Cathari had missed, a faint pattern in the Varn movements, a predictable rhythm in their attacks. Human analysts mapped it quickly. They understood instinctively what it meant. It was a hunting pattern. The Varn were moving toward another colony. The Cathari were shocked. "How did you see that so quickly?" one of them asked. A human technician smiled softly and replied, "Because we've hunted each other before. We know how predators think. It wasn't arrogance, it was experience. The fleet moved before the Varn could strike again. They arrived just as the Varn ships began descending upon a Cathari colony world. What followed wasn't a battle of destruction, it was a defense born of unity." The human ships moved with precision and speed, protecting the Cathari vessels while absorbing heavy fire. The Cathari used their advanced energy fields to shield the humans in return. The two species moved as if they had trained together for years. At one point, when a Cathari cruiser's engines failed, a human battleship moved directly in front of it, taking the full impact of an incoming blast. Every human aboard that ship knew the risk, but none hesitated. After hours of struggle, the Varn were forced to retreat. The joint fleet stood victorious. When the silence returned, the stars around them felt heavier than ever. The Cathari ships sent out distress beacons for survivors. The human engineers worked tirelessly, repairing systems and helping wounded Cathari officers. In the quiet aftermath, something unexpected happened. A Cathari admiral walked onto the human command bridge, still trembling from shock. He looked around at the human crew, tired, wounded, but still alert, and said softly, "You fight like the end of the world has already happened and you refuse to let it happen again." No one replied. They didn't need to. The humans simply went back to work. That night, aboard the flagship, the Cathari Council held an emergency session. They reviewed the battle footage and came to a single conclusion. Humanity was not just strong. They were unstoppable when united. Every simulation the Cathari had run before meeting Earth had underestimated human willpower. Machines could be measured. Logic could be predicted. But will, the human will, was beyond calculation. The Cathari leader recorded a private message in their archives. They are not warriors by nature, but when they rise to protect, they are the storm itself. When the fleet returned home, the galaxy was different. News of the joint victory spread across systems faster than light. The Varn had been pushed back for the first time in centuries, not by ancient powers, but by an alliance led by a young, determined species from a small blue planet. On Earth, celebrations filled the cities, not because of victory, but because of unity. For the first time, humanity had proven it could protect more than itself. Yet in the quiet corners of both species' leadership, the same thought lingered. Humanity had shown its strength, and the galaxy had seen it. What began as curiosity had turned into respect, and respect was slowly turning into something deeper: fear. The Cathari knew now that the humans were not just another rising civilization. They were a force shaped by every hardship their planet had ever thrown at them. And somewhere, far beyond the stars, other civilizations had begun to take notice. They had seen the recordings. They had heard the words of the human officer who said, "Fear never brings peace." And they whispered among themselves, wondering if this young species, born from war, raised by struggle and fueled by hope, might one day be the power that would change everything. The humans didn't think of themselves as heroes. They were just doing what they always did, helping where they could, fighting when they had to, and standing together even when the odds were impossible. But the galaxy had learned something important that day. Humanity didn't need to conquer to prove its power. It only needed to act. And in that simple truth, the Cathari found their greatest lesson yet. They had come to protect humanity. Instead, they found themselves protected by it. The stars looked calm again, but everyone who had been part of the joint mission knew the calm would not last. The victory against the Varn had changed everything. The galaxy now looked at humanity with new eyes. The humans had proven something far more powerful than technology. They had proven spirit. The Cathari fleets returned to their home systems, greeted by celebrations, songs, and endless questions. But beneath all the excitement, their leaders could not stop thinking about what they had seen. The humans had fought with courage that made no sense to the Cathari way of thinking. They fought not because they enjoyed war, but because they couldn't stand to see anyone fall while they could still stand. The footage of the battle spread across Cathari channels. It showed human ships taking heavy damage to shield Cathari cruisers, human engineers working for hours without rest, and a single human pilot flying into enemy fire to save a disabled craft. Every Cathari who watched those moments felt something they hadn't felt in centuries: shock mixed with admiration. In the days that followed, the Cathari Council invited the human delegation back to their capital world. It was the first time any human had been allowed to step on an alien home planet. When the transport ship entered the Cathari system, the humans were struck by its beauty. The planet glowed with soft golden light, its skies full of shimmering rings that reflected its twin suns. Cities floated on great platforms above forests and oceans. Everything was peaceful, quiet, balanced. The humans felt a deep calm as they descended, but the Cathari were not calm. Their scientists and philosophers were divided. Some believed humanity was the hope the galaxy needed, a species capable of protecting peace. Others whispered fears that humans were too powerful, too unpredictable, and too willing to face danger without hesitation. When the humans finally arrived at the council chamber, the room was filled with light and silence. The Cathari leader greeted them with grace and respect, saying, "You have shown us the meaning of strength that does not seek dominance. We wish to understand what gives you that strength." The human representative paused, looking around at the alien faces glowing softly in the chamber. Then he said, "Our strength isn't something we plan or design. It's what grows when everything else fails. We learned it the hard way, by surviving our own mistakes." The Cathari exchanged long glances. To them, failure was something to be erased, forgotten. But humans spoke of it as a teacher. It was something the Cathari had never understood until now. In the following days, the humans were invited to speak at learning centers and institutes across the Cathari world. They told stories of Earth, how humanity had faced its own darkness many times and still found light. They spoke about the oceans rising and falling, about wars that nearly ended civilization, about rebuilding cities from ashes. The Cathari students listened in silence, their lights dim and still, when one young Cathari asked, "Why didn't your people give up?" The human smiled and replied, "Because giving up doesn't end pain, it just gives it a home." Those words spread like wildfire through the Cathari network. Soon, artists began creating pieces inspired by humanity's resilience. Songs were written about courage, Murals appeared on city walls showing human and Cathari figures standing together beneath a shared sky. The idea that had once frightened them was now transforming their culture. But while peace and admiration grew, so did curiosity from others. Across the galaxy, other advanced civilizations had begun watching. Many of them had seen humans as a small, developing species, interesting but harmless. Now they watched the recordings of the joint battle, listened to the human speeches, and started to wonder what kind of species Earth had truly created. In hidden discussions across distant stars, leaders of other empires whispered that the humans might become the balance or the threat of the future. Back on the Cathari homeworld, the discussions between human and Cathari leaders continued. One evening, a small group gathered to talk about what they had both learned from the conflict with the Varn. The Cathari commander said softly, "You humans don't just fight battles, you carry them inside you. Even when you win, you remember. Why?" The human answered, "Because remembering helps us grow. If we forget, we'll lose the part of us that tries to be better." The Cathari were silent again. Their species had lived in peace for so long that they had forgotten the feeling of struggle. They had forgotten how pain could lead to strength. And now, through humanity, they were remembering. Over the next few months, the two civilizations built the first joint academy for interspecies cooperation. Humans trained alongside Cathari in science, exploration, and diplomacy. It was more than a school, it was a symbol. Young minds from both species worked together, learning how to combine heart and logic, instinct and reason. One day, while watching a group of students learning to pilot new hybrid ships, a Cathari elder turned to a human instructor and said, "When we first came to your world, we thought we came to teach. Now we see we came to learn." That moment captured the truth that everyone was slowly realizing. The Cathari had found in humanity something they had lost: the drive to reach further, the courage to rebuild, and the will to stand again no matter how heavy the fall. As time passed, the joint fleet became a symbol of hope for the galaxy. The two species began traveling together to outer systems, helping smaller colonies rebuild and sharing technology that improved lives. The humans always insisted on teaching the same simple principle: strength is only real when it protects others. But not everyone accepted this peace easily. Some Cathari advisors warned their leaders that humanity's power would one day become uncontrollable. "They carry fire in their hearts," one said. "Fire can warm, but it can also burn." Yet even with that warning, the alliance continued to grow stronger. One evening, during a quiet ceremony to honor those lost in the Varn conflict, a Cathari elder stood before both species and spoke from the heart. "We feared humanity would bring war to our stars," he said. "Instead, they brought memory. They reminded us what it means to feel alive." The humans bowed their heads in silence. They didn't see themselves as saviors. They were explorers, builders, dreamers, and sometimes fighters when they had to be. They had only done what humans always did: face the unknown and find a way to survive it. After the ceremony, the Cathari leader sent a message to Earth. It was broadcast to the entire human population. The voice, calm and musical, echoed through every screen. "Your world carries a light unlike any other. We came to you believing we were the older ones, the wiser ones. But we now know wisdom is not age, it is endurance. You are the galaxy's reminder that even after destruction, life can rise again." The message brought silence across the planet. People in homes, offices, and streets stopped what they were doing to listen. Some smiled, some cried quietly. Humanity, once considered fragile and divided, was now seen as the heart of something far greater than itself. And yet, among the stars, something deeper was forming. The galaxy had seen the humans' power, their kindness, their will, their unity, and the other civilizations were beginning to prepare. Some wanted to be allies, others wanted to be cautious. A few even began to fear what would happen if the humans were ever truly threatened. The humans knew none of this. To them, life went on as it always had, one problem at a time, one step at a time. But far beyond Earth, quiet voices were saying the same thing over and over. They came from a small blue world, and they are changing everything. As years passed, the alliance between Earth and the Cathari became the foundation of a new era of peace. The stars that once separated species now connected them. Trade routes opened, science advanced, and more worlds began to join this growing union. But deep within the Cathari archives, the recordings from the first battle with the Varn, were kept safely. They were not hidden out of fear, but out of respect. Because in those images, in those few moments when humans had stood between life and destruction, the Cathari saw something they could never forget. They saw what it meant to fight not for power, but for purpose. And so the legend of humanity began to spread quietly from world to world, not as conquerors, but as protectors. The galaxy had met a species that didn't run from the dark because they had already walked through it. The Cathari understood now. Humanity's greatest power was not its machines, not its weapons, and not its knowledge. It was the unbreakable heart that refused to stop beating, no matter how many times it was broken. Years passed after the great alliance between humans and the Cathari began. The galaxy had grown quieter, safer, and more connected. Trade ships now moved freely between dozens of worlds, and wherever a human vessel appeared, it was welcomed with open channels and respect. What had started as fear had turned into trust. What had once been distance had become friendship. Yet for humanity, peace was something new, something they had longed for but didn't always know how to live with. On Earth, people walked under calm skies again, watching lights from alien ships pass quietly in orbit. Children grew up learning alien languages in school. Farmers used Cathari soil machines to grow food faster and cleaner. For the first time in centuries, there was no war, no hunger, no division. Still, deep in the human spirit, there was a quiet restlessness. Humans had always been explorers, and when they were not moving forward, they felt incomplete. The stars had given them purpose again, and that hunger for discovery was returning stronger than ever. The United Earth Council, together with the Cathari High Council, started a new mission. It was called the Dawn Path. Its goal was to explore the outer edges of the known galaxy, to see what lay beyond the maps, places no ship had ever dared to go. When the mission was announced, volunteers flooded in from both species. Scientists, engineers, pilots, and dreamers, all wanting to be part of something that might define the future. The flagship Horizon Light was a masterpiece of combined human and Cathari technology. Its engines glowed with Cathari crystal energy, while its hull carried the reinforced plating of human design. It was not a warship, it was a beacon. The launch was watched by billions. Across Earth, Cathar, and other allied worlds, people stood under open skies or in front of screens, watching the ship rise slowly into the darkness. There was hope in every heartbeat, and pride in every tear that fell. When the Horizon Light finally disappeared into the stars, a silence filled the world, a silence full of dreams. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The mission traveled far beyond the reach of any known signal relay. They saw suns that burned blue and white, planets made of crystal and ice, and fields of light that stretched across entire systems. They discovered ancient ruins floating in silence, remnants of civilizations that had lived and vanished long before either humans or Cathari had existed. Each discovery changed how they saw themselves. The humans realized that even in this vast galaxy, life had always tried to find a way, no matter the form it took. It reminded them of Earth's own journey, from dust to cities, from fear to hope. But on the edge of the explored frontier, something unexpected happened. One day, as the Horizon Light scanned a dark, quiet region between two dead stars, it picked up a faint signal so old and weak it was almost lost in the cosmic noise. It wasn't natural. It was artificial. Someone had built it. The message was strange. It wasn't words or images. It was a pattern, a rhythm of tones repeating again and again. The Cathari scientists couldn't recognize it, but the humans heard something in it that made their hearts tighten. It was a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. After long analysis, they discovered that the signal was older than both their civilizations combined. It had been pulsing in the dark for millions of years, waiting for someone to find it. The crew followed it for days, tracing the source through debris fields and collapsing asteroids until they reached a massive, dark structure orbiting a dying sun. It wasn't a planet and it wasn't a ship. It was something between both, an enormous ring-like station covered in dust and frozen stone. As they approached, their scanners detected faint traces of power still running deep within the structure. It was ancient but not dead. When the first landing teams entered, they found corridors lined with carvings, symbols of a species long gone. The walls told stories of peace, conflict, and rebirth, and among those carvings there was something that left everyone speechless, a depiction of human-like figures. They were not exact, but the resemblance was clear. Eyes forward, 2 arms, 2 legs, a posture that looked almost human. And around those figures were others, different shapes, different beings, all standing together under a single star. The scientists could not explain it. The carvings were far too old. They came from a time before Earth even existed. As they explored deeper, they found a chamber filled with crystal tablets that glowed faintly when touched. When the humans made contact, the crystals projected brief holograms, memories of a lost age. The holograms showed vast fleets moving through the stars, not to fight, but to unite. The ancient civilization had once tried to bring the galaxy together, just as humanity was now doing. They had believed in peace through strength, in compassion over control. But something had gone wrong. The final recordings showed the lights dimming, the voices fading, and a single phrase repeating in an unknown language. When translated, it said, "Let them remember us when they rise again." The crew was silent for a long time. It was as if the message had been waiting, not just for anyone, but for them. When the discovery reached Earth and Kethar, the reaction was beyond imagination. People felt connected to something far greater than history. They realized that their alliance, their unity, their courage, it all might be part of a cycle much older than they could comprehend. Scholars debated what the message meant. Some said it was a warning, others said it was a blessing. But for the common people, it became a symbol of purpose. Humanity had not just found friends among the stars, they had found meaning. The message from the past became the motto of the new galactic accord. Let them remember us when they rise again. It reminded every species that what they built today would shape what came after. Years later, the Horizon Light returned home, carrying the crystals and data that would take decades to fully understand. But it also carried something invisible, a deeper connection between all who called the stars home. When the ship landed back on Earth, the entire planet celebrated. The Cathari delegation arrived to greet their human friends, and together they walked through the streets filled with light and sound. One human leader stood on a platform, looking out at the vast crowd and said, "We went to the edge of the galaxy and found traces of those who dreamed before us. They built what they could. Now it is our turn to build better." The word spread everywhere, echoing across worlds. From that day, humanity's role in the galaxy changed forever. They were no longer seen as newcomers or warriors. They became guides, beacons of progress. The humans had proven that strength meant more than survival. It meant the courage to connect, to rebuild, to remember. And so the years rolled on. Cities on alien worlds were filled with human engineers, teachers, and explorers. The Cathari learned laughter from the humans, while humans learned patience from the Cathari. Together, they built the kind of future that no single world could ever have made alone. Sometimes, when the night was quiet and stars were bright, old veterans of the First War would look up at the sky and whisper, "We thought we were fighting to survive, but we were really fighting to begin." Generations later, children on distant colonies would listen to stories about that first contact, how the aliens came to Earth, how they feared humans, and how they learned what humanity truly was. The children would laugh and ask, "Did it really happen?" And their teachers would smile softly and say, "Yes, and that's why you're here now." Because the truth was simple. Humanity had once been small, fragile, uncertain, but through every loss, every challenge, they had kept moving forward. They never stopped believing that something better waited beyond the next horizon. And now, they had become that something better for others. The galaxy would never forget the day humans stepped into the stars, not with anger, not with fear, but with open hands and unbreakable hearts. The old signal still pulsed faintly from that forgotten station near the dying sun, repeating the same rhythm through the dark. It was a rhythm that no longer felt lonely, because now someone had answered.